welcome to Mapping the College Audition, a podcast where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA, that's Musical Theater College Auditions, and today we've got a Who's Your Hoosier of a show lined up for you. Richard, Roland, and DJ Gray of Indiana University. We've been working to schedule them for quite some time now because we wanted to get this episode out for our MTCAers who are doing our private audition day, with this being the last episode of those for 4 particular schools. That's Indiana, Shenandoah, Webster, and the University of Oklahoma. So we've done it. Yay. Big congrats to us. And I do say us because the great Meghan Cordier is back, if we can believe it. Did you catch the extra hello? I threw in an extra hello just for you because there are now 2 of us. It's not just me saying hello. It's hello, hello, because Meghan is back. Welcome back, Meghan. How you doing?
Thank you. You have just told me that the second hello represents me, and I really appreciate that, Charlie. That's very sweet.
You better believe it. Our listeners, they've been clamoring for more Meghan. And I also want to be clear, it was never our intention to cut Meghan from the intro. It's just that we changed our recording pattern. So often I was recording the intros on my own, but Meghan is back and producing our show. She's been for a while now. You'll hear little snippets in the interview, maybe a laugh, maybe a moment, but she's been back.
Well, I'm happy to be back and be able to see you do our intro live and work with our guests a little bit more one-on-one, because I've been away doing some, other MTCA things.
But Meghan, you also very successfully ran our junior workshop.
Oh, thanks. Some of our very lucky listeners got to see Charlie and I's faces for the junior workshop, which you so lovely plugged for the last couple episodes. So,
do you think they were deeply disappointed, Meghan? I do feel like they saw our faces and they went, "Oh, you've got radio faces."
You have radio faces. Yeah. Well, maybe you, but I won't say for me. Self-talk is important in our performing world.
We're going to talk about wellness later. You're right about that.
Just a funny anecdote. My sisters often say, like, "I love you," and I go, "I love me too."
Very good.
Rather than return it, you have to
take the compliment.
Take the compliment. All that silliness aside, we're so happy to have some of our podcast listeners join us for our junior workshop and got to talk about a little bit more about MTCA, and now we get to meet them in the flesh or on Zoom as well.
In the flesh is such a weird way of saying in person. It just feels so carnal.
In person just sounds so like online, in person, pandemic. So anything that's different just makes me feel a little bit better about life.
In the flesh.
In the flesh.
I did talk, speaking of the flesh, I did talk a little bit last episode about my personal journey with wellness. And I mentioned that webinar that we're having tomorrow night. If you listen on episode drop day, and if you're listening 36 hours late, it's happening right now. You can also check out the link in our show notes or on our website under events. But I thought rather than just me plug it, we'd bring on the great Erica Strasberg to talk to you a little bit about wellness. Erica, welcome on the pod. How are you doing today?
I am so great. I love a podcast.
We all do here. We all.
Yep.
So I would love just to give a 15-second-ish bio of you, of like, why in the world are people listening to you talk about wellness?
I went to Carnegie Mellon with Charlie Murphy. I've been acting since. And my interest in this field started in such a vigorous program because I realized how absolutely imperative my spiritual, mental, and physical health was. If you're down a week, you really struggle. And I think the appeal of working with me is that I've been there and I really do get it. And I thought, I want to get on the helping end of this. And I went back to school and I got board certified and started my own business. And here we are.
Well, give us a little bit of like what wellness is, because I think it's such a large umbrella. They've heard Carrie talk about the therapy side of wellness, kind of. And we talk, we're sometimes talking physical, sometimes talking mental, such a big umbrella of what we're talking about. I'd love to hear like what your thoughts are on how it can be relevant to these auditioning seniors and your students, and also your specific expertise.
For my money, I like to look at it as an active process. So it is the choices that we're making for our well-being. To me, that is wellness. So that it makes it an active thing that we're working on, hopefully every day. And it looks different for everyone, but I like to keep it active, as we do in acting.
Got to keep it active.
Got to keep it active.
Tactics active.
That's right.
And do you mind giving me a couple examples? I know you've now had some seasons working with our MTCA students. What might a senior, or it could be a junior starting now if they're really anxious about but let's say I come in and I really want some help with anxiety or with structuring my life, or maybe I'm struggling with nutrition. Like, what are some of the things that you feel like you have been able to help students with in the past?
Yeah, I'll give two examples because I think this applies depending on your circumstance. I had a lovely student last year who called me the morning of she had multiple auditions that day. It was, I think, a unified in Chicago. She called me from her hotel room, sort of in a panic, and we just took 45 minutes and really got her centered
Mm-hmm.
and got her in the right headspace before she went out into that big day. We checked in again that night, decided, do we need to do this again tomorrow morning before her second day? She kept me posted. We kept in touch throughout the weekend, and I was just basically there to make sure that she was in the right headspace moving through this huge audition. She ended up getting into her first choice school that
Boom, boom, boom,
weekend.
boom,
It
boom.
just was all great. Another example is someone, some of the students I meet with a bit more regularly. Obviously, most MTCA students have a ton going on. It is a lot to manage. And so we'll meet regularly just to make sure they're balancing all of the things going on: homework, play rehearsal, what's going on in their social life, their nutrition, their sleep hygiene, all of that stuff. I'm there to check in and say, hey, are you on the right track? If not, how can we make some adjustments? And then we'll check back in the next week or 2 weeks later to make sure they sort of took the note and applied what we talked about and, improved it on their own from there.
It's so cool. I mean, and really, you see the width of that umbrella when you talk about like psychological competitiveness on one side of it, and the other side of it really about my physical health. Am I sleeping enough? What am I eating? How am I balancing
Yeah.
my schedule? That's a pretty big wellness umbrella.
Well, and it's all wildly important and it's so connected. And I think the students really start to see that this year in such a big year as this.
Oh, it is really this year specifically. It feels like as we kind of start to get back to normal, because last year still was in the full, the full throes of pandemic, of post-pandemic life or whatever. And it feels like now we're all trying to start to get back to normal. And at least in my personal experience, in my life experience, it's like everyone in my life is now dealing with all the crap from the past 2 years. Because now we're seeing it come up,
100%. Oh,
like
100%. They told us that the second wave of the pandemic would be sort of this mental, physical health.
uh-huh,
And we're definitely seeing it happen for all ages. But
for all
I
ages.
do try to be a resource for parents if they need me as well. I understand my mom and dad went through it with me, and I understand that there's a lot going on, and I'm always happy to just be there for them as well as we check in and navigate with these kids moving forward.
Ugh. Well, if we want to hear more of me and Erica chatting about wellness, we know we have a webinar coming up tomorrow night. This is
Woohoo!
through the magic of podcasting. Tomorrow night, we're recording this in advance, but tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern, we'll put the link in the show notes if you want to hear more from our wonderful Erica.
Sounds good. See you then.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Erica. I will see you very soon. Okay, a big thank you to Erica. And also, I was going to make Meghan fall on her sword for this one, despite it completely not being her fault. But you'll notice there's a brief period in this interview where my sound gets a little funky. This is due to a technical issue, which we worked to address but couldn't quite fix all the way. So it's going to sound like I'm driving through a tunnel for a few minutes. It won't last long, and I'll be back to my sonorous self, I promise. This same technical issue made us cut a little bit of DJ and my witty banter. We had a little witty exchange at the top, but it didn't sound great. So just please add in 20% extra charm and wit into your listening ear when you're hearing DJ talk. But with that apology, on to the interview with Rich and DJ. Well, we are honored to have Rich, Roland, and DJ Gray of Indiana University on the pod today. Rich has a BFA in theater performance from Denison University and an MFA in MT from the Pennsylvania State University. He's a third-generation Broadway veteran in stuff like Thoroughly Modern Millie, The Scarlet Pimpernel, Follies, and was a teacher at Penn State and University of West Florida before becoming the head of BFA MT at Indiana. And we also have the wonderful DJ Gray, who is the associate head for the BFA MT program. She has a BA from UC San Diego, an MFA from UC Irvine. She's a performer, director, choreographer. She's been on Broadway in The Producers and the associate choreographer for the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, where she must know our wonderful Sarah Salzberg, who we had on the pod, and Xanadu as well, where she also would probably know my partner, potentially. We'll get to that as we go. Come on, Charlie, let's just get through the bios. They both teach at Indiana, which is in Bloomington, Indiana. They have class size, very intimate classes of 10 to 15 students, and offer BFAs in MT, dance, and then BAs in theater and drama. DJ Rich, welcome on the pod. How you doing?
Great. Great, Charlie. How are you? Thank you.
We're doing really well over here. We're so excited to have you on. I mentioned my partner who is an Indiana alum, and she was like, when are you going to have Indiana on the pod? And I was like, I know, I'm trying to get them. We're trying to schedule. It's always tough with people's schedules and all those things. But I was like, we're going to get Indiana, I promise, on the pod. And we're also so excited to have you on because we know we're going to be doing this private audition in December, which a lot of our students now, of course, are going to be participating in. And so they're so excited to get that information, as well as our broader student listener base as well. Before I dive into the school, I just love to ask each of you. I gave that really short bio, but I'd love, is there anything else in terms of fun facts or tidbits or things that students should know about you personally before we get into the school? So I'll start with Rich and then we'll go to DJ. Fill us in on just a little bit of your journey to the school.
I'm a fourth generation performer, third generation Broadway veteran. That doesn't mean that makes me the best for this job. My training in other areas makes me good for this job, but also we bring in a really good sense of the business with us. We've all worked in the business at pretty high levels. And again, that's not a horn blowing thing. That is the level of confidence with which we come into our classrooms and how we approach our students when it comes to getting them ready to step into a very challenging industry, no matter how you slice it. So I came to going backwards. I came to Indiana University 6 years ago, strictly as a visiting assistant professor to teach some musical theater acting classes. And not even 6 months into my first year here, the former head said they were leaving and for another job at another school. And I was sort of handed this position, which I took on, and through 5 years, I'm still learning the ropes. So being area head as well as being a professor of musical theater, it is a daily challenge, but 99.998% of the time, it's rewarding. That tiny little thing, you just take some Advil and it goes away.
0.002%, you're saying is
Thank you. You're better at math than I am.
Well, for sure. Subtraction, I can handle. Yeah.
I came here by way of Penn State, where I had been teaching for a very brief amount of time. It's also where I'd gotten my master's in directing for musical theater. And that's where I fell in love with teaching. I had always been a coach in New York, private audition coaching, acting the song. But actually being in a room with students and having sort of the proper setting to really dive into the work, where that is the main focus, was what I grew to love. Plus, I also I come with a vast knowledge of musical theater history, form and function and analysis. So I've lent that to the program as well. But before that, I was a director and performer for years, and I grew up sort of doing it. I grew up watching my family do it. So it was always around me. And I don't know that I was destined for other things. That's really weird to say. But I do say I did not know I would be sitting in a theater department doing this and passing on sort of the knowledge of what we gave and received from the industry and profession and craft. And I think if you told me I was going to be in this position when I was just making my Broadway debut in the late 90s, I would have said, "You're crazy. I'm going to stay here on Broadway." Whoops, here I am. I guess in a nutshell, that's what got me here. And just having the chance to look at a curriculum and a program and sort of reshape it, that was a daunting responsibility at first, but little by little, we've been carving this program into something that is unique, yet and challenging, and certainly rigorous, but really gives an opportunity for students to learn from our perspectives as artists, technicians, and professionals. So we are helping them step into, like I said, that this rather uncertain and challenging, ultimately rewarding industry.
And DJ, yeah, please, how did you come there?
Well, right after my undergraduate degree, a BA in video art, I decided to jump right into a master's degree. So I kind of went the other way where a lot of my colleagues did. The undergraduate did the business and went, you know what? I'm going to go into teaching and go into, getting my master's. So I did it first, and then I gathered a lot of experiences along the way after my graduate degree, and fell into, first dreams of going to Broadway, and made it there, and got into my first show of producers, and then fell right into choreography, as you had read from my bio. So I did that for quite a while. I also taught gyrotonic and Pilates quite a bit, and in New York, and in between choreographing regionally as well as assisting on Broadway. And then it came to a point where I really just wanted to settle down teaching. And Indiana fell in my lap, and I was in love with the school, and in love with my colleagues.
I love it. All right, so give me a little bit of what it is to be an Indiana University student. What kind of commonality do we have among many students in the program?
Highly individual. We're not a factory. We know that everybody develops their own technique in their own way to suit their own mind, body, spirit, abilities. I think it is about taking what the individual has to offer and building upon that. The only thing we work at stripping away are bad habits and things that get in your own way. But this belief of the system of breaking something down to rebuild it, I know that the past few years has shown us that that doesn't work, at least for us. That when you break something down, you're actually just breaking it. So why do we have to break something to fix it again? So let's take what you've got to offer and build on that. What are your strengths? What are your confidences? Where are your opportunities for improvement? Let's fill that up. Let's put the confidence where it needs to be. Yes, we're going to make you dance in the second row of the room today because you're going to be next to that person who is a little bit more advanced than you, and you're going to pick things up from them. It is about again, it's just the individual looking at how the theater is changing. We look to Broadway as the benchmark. It's not the be all end all, but it's an example of where the industry is on a highly commercial level. Look at the sizes and shapes and colors and ethnicities and genders of people on Broadway right now. It's not nearly what it was 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I use Great Comet, Hamilton, Dear Evan Hansen, Come From Away as perfect examples of how the ensemble, and I'm not meaning the people that just sing in the background, the ensemble, the entire show is changing. It's just changing what it looks like. And we want to celebrate that. We also want to nurture it, and we also want to push it forward.
I love it. And so tell me a little bit, and both of you can jump in there, especially in the different disciplines. I'd love to hear kind of on a more granular level, what are the 4 years? So what am I taking through from acting, singing, and dancing in terms of the curriculum?
DJ, why don't you start with dance? Because you helped introduce, I'll let you tell the Pilates story.
Yes, we have a Pilates certification program, as well as a Pilates class that we ask all of our students to enroll in, and it's required, and it's for injury prevention, and it's something they'll use for the rest of their lives. And then we don't have a placement program. We just can see where they are as they enter, because they've already auditioned for the program. Where they are placed within our classes. So there's a history of musical theater class through the dance that Lauren teaches, and I teach the beginning. In case you're coming singer first, we gotta get you up to speed, give you experience in every dance form. So we get a beginning, and we also had advanced styles, as well as in terms of the historical aspect, and tap. Of course, tap. And we also have Robert Burton has come on aboard with us as well. And he is teaching basically a rhythm tap class for beginners and advanced, and also jazz classes.
I love it. Yeah, Rich, you want to talk about the acting and singing as well?
Yeah, they never stop doing all three. There are 8 semesters of private voice lessons, so that never stops. There is of a series of classes that I am introducing this coming year. Some have existed before, but we've just sort of, in part of my restructuring of how that system will go, and it's 4 semesters of intense musical theater studio classes. Studio 1 is acting the song, just getting the fundamentals of what that is and what that means. Semester 2 is musical theater scene study. How do we approach the technique of going from a spoken scene into sung, or how do we approach the fully sung scene? Semester 3 is devoted solely to audition techniques, which you can be great at acting the song, you can be a great performer all the way around, but if you don't have a confident audition skill, that's going to get in your way all the time. And then semester 4 is an advanced methods class where we cover everything from styles to holding how to approach an 11 o'clock number, how to make an entrance, how to, it's sort of like the polishing class. So I'm very excited to introduce that this fall. Up till now, we've only ever had the acting the song and audition techniques, which I brought in a couple years ago. But as things change and classes open up, it was my goal really to put more musical theater acting. And by that, I mean, acting is acting. Musical theater acting isn't different than regular acting, but just adding that element to the given circumstance of song in the world. And aside from that, all BFAs take acting 1, acting 2, acting 3. They have the option to take acting 4, which is for the camera. And most of these courses are repeatable. So you don't have to, one and done. I can never take that class again. Now I want to visit acting 2 again and get some more of that scene study character work in. We have a master class that meets every Wednesday, and through the semester, each student gets up and performs for everybody else, the entire program. So we're always getting you up and working. It really never stops. And that the new series that I'm introducing this year culminates in senior year, 2 semesters of what we call 401 Showcase, but it really is just a continuation of everything the musical theater classes have taught us, putting it into that sort of senior launch year.
And would you say of the 3 disciplines, is there one that has more of a focus for Indiana? Would you say, hey, we're really trying to be a strong music-based program, or really trying to we lead with acting, really lead with dances? Are they all equal, or is there one that sort of elevates above the others?
I mean, ideally, they're fluid. They interchange. They one takes precedence here, the other precedence here. But ultimately, I think that our emphasis sits in the acting. That being said, when I came here, Indiana was already known for having some of the best voices in the program. So the singing has always been top notch. The dancing has always been great. DJ and Lauren have even elevated that even more. But I don't like to approach anything for theater craft without acting based technique underneath that dance move, underneath that song, underneath that text. It's all intention based for me, and it's rooted in the text. So I think we're in agreement across the boards about that it just nothing is empty. Nothing is being done for no reason. So acting as an overall for me is the core. And so you act in 3 ways. You act through spoken text, you act through sung text, and you act through dancing.
And then just while we're on the acting side of it, how does the acting, in terms of the BFA acting, how do those students interact with the BFA MT? Or, how, if I was a student, or maybe I'm a BA theater and drama student, how do I then have opportunities, if I do, in the musical theater or in the dance world?
Mm-hmm. First, all musicals are open for all main stage musicals are open to for auditions across the board. There have been times when BA students, there is room to take a BFA class. It has to be by permission, and I want to be transparent about that. The BFA classes give priority to the BFA MT students, but we have we sometimes have BA students. Sometimes we also have BSOF students, and that is Bachelor of Science in an Outside Field, and that's from the Jacobs School of Music. It's a completely different college, but about 12 years ago, the founder of this program, George Pinney, created the BSOF in musical theater, which is in itself, in essence, it is a musical theater minor add-on for voice students at Jacobs, whether they're in opera or jazz. And we've had a handful of each every year that just get a little bit of the musical theater training in their pocket for their industry as well.
You're describing the great Elizabeth Stanley. That is exactly the degree that she has.
Yes,
and she talks about it on the book.
Exactly. Our very own Ray Feldman has that degree. And, Elizabeth has been great in coming back and doing master classes with our students. Because technically when she graduated from here, the BFA and MT didn't exist yet. So, but she blissfully counts herself amongst the people that, got their MT. Yeah.
So I would just love to hear a little bit about how do you prepare your students for the launch into the business? So from their senior year, but you mentioned some of those audition skills, but then especially we talk about business to business stuff, meeting agents, et cetera. I'd love to hear about that.
We have this amazing semester of working in the profession / business of the business class. And that is, it is a lecture based class, but it's also a project based class. And every junior is required to take it in the fall of their junior year. So they start thinking about that outside world with 2 years to go instead of just the 1 year of panic.
Mm-hmm.
And they do everything from money management, learning about tax deductions for the performing artist, how to save money. I mean, every student
there seems to be a
have
focus
class
here.
on
It's
that.
really talking about money a lot. This is really
Well, it's an industry, I think that's where, and we like to remind our students that art is great, but if you get paid for your art, that's even better.
Mm-hmm.
And that there shouldn't be, the two are not mutually exclusive, and there should be no shame in asking for money for your art.
Mm-hmm.
But also we look at city projects. A bunch of cities are assigned to groups of students, and they put together an entire project based upon what life is like in that city. Because we all know theater is not the only place with a livable career in theater. So
You mean New York is not the only place?
New York is not the center of everything. Although I'm from there and I love my city. It does have the best pizza. Sorry, Chicago. Seattle, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Raleigh, Miami, Orlando. Like there's a ton of work in Orlando. And people think, well, it's just theme parks. Well, it can be, but it's also, there's a huge voiceover population down there. There's a lot of theater. Yes, of course, the theme park entertainment industry is gigantic, and nothing to be sneezed at if you're looking to just get in there and start working. So they learn what the cost of living is in each city, what the performance opportunities are, what rent is like, how accessible is everything, so that we're really understanding it's just so much more than just plopping down in a city and saying, now what? Getting to know opportunities about the community. One of the best things about people who work on the New York project is they look at, well, how can I get involved? Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. How can I work how can I work with the Actors Fund? How do I get myself involved in the community? We look at employment opportunities that keep you tied to the industry if they can, when you're not working on an actual contract at that time. I don't call it survival job because it just puts us in a Game of Thrones situation, and it's already tough. So I call it supplemental income. What are you doing to keep things moving forward between gigs? So we encourage them to open the lid off on their entrepreneurial box and take a look inside. What can they do? There, you can do a nanny service for actors. You can do a vegan catering service for dancers who don't have the time while they're in rehearsals at 42nd Street Studios. How do you stay involved? Bartending and waiting tables are both noble professions, and I've done them both. And there's a lot of money to be had there, but what you lose is your hours, and you lose. How do you go to that 10 a.m. open call when you've closed up a bar at 4 a.m.? How do you wash the beer off of you for that for that open call? So we like to, and like I said earlier, because we all come from the industry, we don't come into this with rose-colored glasses. And some of the best compliments I've received from students that are now out in the profession 1 or 2 to 4 years have said, wow, I mean, it's been a great time, but thank you so much for not telling us it's going to be walking into the Emerald City. And we're not cynical, but we've got our bruises, and we show them proudly.
Yep. And then, but what about access into that Emerald City? If you're coming from the Midwest, and if someone says, I do want to go to New York, or I do want to go to LA, in terms of meeting agents or casting directors or showcasing, how do I kind of find a way to break my way in?
The alum network from IU is so strong, And particularly within the past, 10 to 12 years, as the MT alum population gets larger in New York, that is the first landing place for most of the BFA MTs, is that they hit New York if that's where they're going, and the first thing to do is reach out to their older sibs from the program and just say, help me out. And by God, every year it's the same. They're there with welcoming arms and a safety net. We've also moved our showcase. We're trying to get this out this year. We moved our senior showcase to spring break. So that gives a chance for students who've never been to New York, because there are always a few, if not half the class, a chance to dip their toes in. And it's not the end of the semester, right? They dip their toes in halfway through going, okay, this is good for me, or this is not good for me. So it is the networking of alums that really help people going. Also, because we work with casting directors and agents, we bring them in for master classes here. That's already a step in a way. That's a toe in the door, is saying, yes, you gave me that master class at IU and you coached me on this song and it was wonderful. Thank you. Or you just let them know you're back in town, and they're really good. We the casting directors we work with, they stay on it. They see our kids, I think, as they do to everybody. There are good people out there.
You mentioned all the places that your students are researching in terms of where they may end up, and some may be New York, LA, whatever, all the different places where you can end up working, Chicago. I'd love to hear, where do your students come from in general? Is it truly all over the country, or more coming from the Midwest? In terms of the breakdown, do you have a sense of where the students are coming from?
They're from all over, really. We have some people from California, some people from New York. I would say a majority is around, some people in state, yes. But I would say around a majority of the Midwest folk. But really, everyone comes from everywhere.
And then so they've done this project, where do they end up? I mean, do most end up going to New York with the musical theater training? A lot of people end up in Orlando or Seattle, or some of those different markets?
Most end up in New York, that's their dream, or some in Chicago. And then a couple of them have popped over the seas, the land, over to England as well.
Can we talk about, since we had this whole class about money, which we're really excited about, can we talk about money in terms of cost of attendance? So I'd love to hear kind of what is the larger cost in terms of the ticket price, and then also in terms of scholarships, how do those work in terms of what I might expect to actually pay, depending what my academics are, and depending artistically, et cetera?
It is not cheap, as everybody already knows. So parents, this is the time to take a little pill or something.
Shut off this episode and move on to the next school. Exactly.
Yep. There's two levels of tuition here, just right off the bat. If you're in state, it's significantly cheaper than if you're out of state, and that's what most state schools do.
And do you have a sense of about what that is? And you don't have to have exact numbers, but do you know about where they are?
I'm going to give roundabout figures. The last time I checked, when I was working on scholarships for last year's incoming class, and IU has this on their website. You can look up, they do a calculator, and I think on paper, at first it looks like 40 something, 40 something grand. I don't want to give anywhere. I think it's between 42 and 44, but then that's just tuition. When all is said and done, I believe, again, don't look it up, please, everybody, look it up. But I believe the last time I looked, it was something around 54. With room and board and books and all of that stuff coming in. And even though the tradition is that nobody really stays in the dorms after their freshman year, they all at least for the MTs, they all get housing off campus, and so that it changes the cost, I think, in certain areas, because you're not paying room and board, but you're paying rent, and you're paying for groceries. Some people still do a meal plan, even though they're not living in a dorm. There's a thing called the Crimson Card, and you load cash onto it and things like that. But it is not cheap. And there are a lot of work study opportunities, a lot of opportunities for students to work. And actually, as I understand it, it is more beneficial to get a job on campus, only because they're going to understand you're a student first. And you actually make better, as far as I understand, again, just from what the students have been telling me, you make better money working on campus. That being said, there's bartending, there's waiting tables, and that's tip based. And so that can, you can have a really good night at that. But also,
but how do you wash the beer off of you to get to that 10 a.m. audition? Rick,
yes,
we know.
yes.
But then what about scholarships on your end? How does it work in terms of, is it more about the artistic scholarships and more about academic? Can you combine the two? How does that work if I'm trying to work that number down as much as I can?
There are both. And the only thing we look at technically, and what we can look at, is the departmental and program scholarships that are awarded through merit. They're awarded through academics, which I have to say, just in general, the academic expectations at IU are pretty high. It's a Research One university, and that infiltrates everything. Infiltrate sounded like the wrong word I wanted to use, but it affects everything. It really affects the expectations of performance, both academic and artistic and whatnot, for everybody. So standards are high. Those on scholarships of most levels have to maintain a certain GPA. The scholarships that there's a whole office of scholarships, which I recommend everybody to look at, because when people come to me about opportunities, we have a few. We have scholarship funds within a program in the department, but sometimes the bigger ones are the ones that are out there to be sought after in terms of whatever the criteria is for each one of those. But we have our own IU Office of Scholarships, and there's a ton of information on there.
Great. You mentioned the Research One University. I'd just love to hear about, outside of the theater program, what does IU afford you? So if I'm going to attend and maybe I'm not going just for the theater program, what else do I get as an IU student?
You get, well, first of all, to talk about that is that we're a small program. We want to keep it that way. But we're a small program within a really large university. We've got so many schools and opportunities for students to take courses outside of either their first of all, their major. For their gen eds, I encourage them to be creative in what they can take for that gen ed requirement. Math, language. A lot of our students have a minor in arts management. And I think that hand in hand with their BFA musical theater training really equips them for an industry as well. Some are already looking at, I might want to go into casting. I might want to go into running a theater, some sort of artistic directorship. That's really popular. We have the BFA leaves not a lot of room to do a second major, but it leaves room for minors. So we have a lot of minors in our program. There's the Kelley School of Business, the Kinsey Institute. We have a lot. We have a lot here. It's the kind of I wish I'd gone here. I shouldn't say I love my alma mater. I love Denison University. But when I look at what IU has to offer, Denison has a population of 2,000 students and we have 40,000. So at IU, it's a little different, of course. But I look at that opportunity, I'm like, wow, students here are so lucky. They have literally, it does require some focus sometimes to bring people in, because everybody wants to do everything they possibly can while they're here. And I understand that. And we encourage that. But when we see burnout happening, we go, hey, you slow down just a second there. Let's actually get some sleep this week. Because we are a small department, we are a program, I should say, we do keep a close eye on our students. And when we see some stumbling going on, we jump in immediately and say, hey, what's going on? Are you, so we like to keep tabs on them.
I'd love to hear just in the, as students are making their decisions, their final decisions, and you're kind of debating between who you've accepted and now they're saying, where do I choose to go? I'd love to hear, what is the information that you think, I wish all these people knew this as they're making those decisions? And then also I'd love to hear maybe a little bit of why they would choose not to go to your school. If they say, you know what, I'm going to actually attend this other school because this bit of information made me go, oh, I'm going in this direction. So what are the things that you really wish they wanted to know? And then what would you say the reasons they choose to go somewhere else?
I think I want them to know that we are training them to be artists. So, and not a cookie cutter, as Rich has talked about a little bit, and that they are going to be strong artists in any discipline that they choose in terms of musical theater. In terms of why they would change their mind is that it is a big university. Sometimes it could be overwhelming. That's the only thing I can think of. And that Bloomington is a little isolated, which is, I think, is fantastic. It really focuses in on what you need to do and what you need to accomplish as a student. It does not allow for a lot of distractions, unless you like cornfields. But yeah, that's the other thing that might draw someone to it or away from it if they don't feel like they feel like they need more of a city feeling, metropolitan feeling about it.
We're going to take a short break. We're going to run a couple ads. And on the back end of this break, we're going to get into the audition process a little bit with Rich and DJ. Back in a flash. All right, we are back with Rich and DJ talking about Indiana University and their audition process. And I'd love to just start off and just ask what makes a great audition for each of you. And maybe you can each speak specifically toward what is a great dance audition and then what is a great acting and singing audition for you.
Great. I want to speak to the dance because, not everyone comes dancer first. And so what we look for in the auditions is a strong a sense of self, of excitement, of a potential, a willingness, an openness. So as long as they are not beating themselves up and having the audition stop for them because they don't have the confidence, we're looking for the confidence no matter what. And of course, we're looking for fantastic dancers as well. But, there's that little piece that we want to see within everyone, that there's potential to grow.
I love it. Yeah. And the acting singing?
It's sort of along the same lines. It's looking at what is the enthusiasm there, what kind of work has been put into this process. It's kind of easy to tell if they're in this full performance mode, and you can tell when behind their eyes comes the phrase, "What are they thinking? I hope they like me." And that's just a general audition trap. Like DJ said, though, I want a strong sense of self. I want to know who you are. I don't want you to. It's really not about playing a role at that point. It's just show me where you are right now, warts and all, and we'll help remove what warts we can so you can shine in your best self while you're here. You don't have to be the world's best singer. And I know I think that's a bit of a myth here. You don't have to be the world's best singer. We've got 4 years to work on that. And we have top-notch voice faculty here. And they have turned people who had no significant training when they first came in, but we saw something there. And in 4 years, you would have never thought they didn't know how to match pitch at one point in their life. And same thing with acting. It's just getting in there and being confident. And, nobody comes in at 17 really being great at any three of them. It's just what they've learned up to that point. And we're not looking for product at all. I think that's where people get confused, is that you have to be the best. No, just be as good as you can be that day. And we'll see your training on your resume. We'll see where you are. It's not about being perfect. That's what I get upset about, is that people just try to be perfect all the time. And there's really just no such thing.
Yep, totally. And it's a confidence of vulnerability to be able to show your warts, right? Yeah. I think often it's fear that makes us turn into
total fear.
Perfect, and try to do that.
And the audition thing is a weird thing, it's great to look good for an audition. It's great to look your best that day, but I would discourage people from wearing something to an audition that they wouldn't be wearing on stage. I don't need 5-inch heels for an audition, because what it's going to do at that age, most likely it's going to throw your center off. You're not going to be on your breath. And it's going to, so the little things like that. So that image of like, if you prefer to audition for me in sneakers and jeans and just a fun shirt, go for it. Go for it. Now, DJ might disagree with me, but it's this idea of having to look perfect for an audition. Please,
well, I love
just be yourself.
Personal style. That's what I always find fun.
I love the wild card option on the pre-screen.
I was just going to ask about it. There we go. You segued right into it. Because I'd love to hear both the wild cards, but also then just what you're looking for in the pre-screen that may be different than the live audition, if at all.
It's definitely a sense. I'm going to sound like a broken record. A sense of self. I just I want to see a sense of playfulness, um, genuine. It's hard to look for genuine connection in a video submission because unless, I don't know, maybe they're singing to somebody over the other side of the camera, it's hard to convey on video. So that's why the wild card really comes in handy, because I get to see you being you. And more often than not, I really do see the real person come out in the wild card. And we've made decisions to bring people in because the audition lining up to it was great. Videos, song great, monologue, dance good. But that wild card showed me a spark that we didn't see in the other videos. So don't make the wild card your best thing. But it's supplemental there for a reason. Really, really do something that just shows yourself in the wild card.
Well, and speaking of the supplemental stuff, so, it's one of the things the students are often asking us is, there's so many things I have to do supplementally. When we look at like the essay, so if we have to do a separate essay for Indiana about, this is for the university, about literature and a piece of art and a real life event or person, or, some of those kind of things. How do you interact then with those essays? Is that really more for the university, or are you going to be reading all those supplements?
That's for us. That's not for the university. They do a separate essay. And to be fair, we keep it short, 1 page, double spaced. What piece of art, literature, historical event would you like to see musicalized? Book is also important. I allow movies to because that's cheating a little bit, because it's sort of the artistic process is already carved out for you. But I do say if a movie, it can't be a musical. It can't be a movie that is known for songs in it, like Fame. It's been done. But I want to see where they're thinking in terms of the creative process, and it doesn't put you in the program as opposed to somebody else who might not write something, but it just shows me your level of interest in that process. And if it's not there, again, it's not a strike against you. It also lets us know who you are a little bit, because sometimes we'll get a revealing passage in an essay that's like, because I blah, 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 I went through this, and this is why this is what brought me to the arts. And I want to do this musical because this is it's a real personal side that strips away that need. Sometimes I just see in the academic essays that it's like, well, I have to write this because I need to show this so I can get into this university.
My mom taught me how to write. Yeah,
exactly. And I just want a little bit of them. Again, it's just part of the process of getting to work with the individual.
And then, so between the two of you, this is nice having two people so you can fight over it. When you have different scores, or let's say someone's a really strong dancer or a really strong actor, how does that work now as you make the decision to come together and say, I want this student or I don't want this student? Do you fight over it? Do you combine the scores into some mathematical 0.002%, or how does all that work?
We fight. No, no, we actually really are pretty well balanced there, because we want to have a well balanced program. So we want to have, our dancers, our singers, what are they first? What do we need to nurture? What kind of class does this look up? What is the makeup of the class? We try to get at least, a well balanced there of all the skills. So we're not heavy in one area,
And how many voices are is there a final decision where we go, I get to say yes, or is it just keep fighting until the vetoes are done, or how does that end up working?
We do place them in order. And so, it goes all the way up to what do we have? 400 last year? Yeah. It goes into an order of, who we want for, and then it just makes it down the line. Is that, Rich, do you think?
Yeah, it's I'd say it's unanimous, and we all have to agree that we want to work with this person. And I don't think we've never had a dissenting, stubborn one person on out. But if it came, I shouldn't even call them stubborn. If there's an issue that somebody has with something then we'll look at that and address that, and we listen. And when somebody will say, well, this da 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 da, oh, I didn't see it from that point of view. Okay, let's reconsider. Because what I don't want to do for us as a faculty is create a situation where I create discomfort on any level. I want us to all agree that this group of students is the group we want.
I love it. And I'd love to hear a little bit about, so you are, as of now, at least I believe, not unified schools. You guys don't go to the New York, Chicago, LA. How does it work with? I know you have this wonderful on-campus audition experience. How does that work then with the virtual? I'd love to hear both about the on-campus experience, but also then with virtual auditions, if you're keeping those or squeezing those in this year.
Well, we're doing both. No, we have not joined Unifieds based on the fact that we don't have the largest faculty. There's only 6 of us really,
Mm-hmm.
and it's when 2 of those 6 are ensconced in directing and choreographing a main stage, or 3 as it was this semester.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of room for that travel. However, we are able to squeeze in MTCA.
Hey now.
So so we I feel like that's and that in a way we are getting the in-person audition when we go to those, that one faculty member, but we do ask that they still submit through our own method, not accepted, because if you haven't, we'd love to waive that accepted fee for those that we all go out and see. We're not set up to do that, so we have to create a separate little Google Drive. It's fine. But the virtual audition is important. We learned how to see some stuff with that during the pandemic. It's still not my favorite way to do it, but it does not decrease your chances of consideration. We hold a certain amount of slots during when we call people back to campus. We hold a certain number of slots for virtual for those who are unable, because we also realized at one point the inequity that presents in terms of accessibility. Not everybody can afford to fly to Indianapolis and then take a car down to Bloomington, right? So that being said, and we want to uphold that, which we are, coming to campus is such a selling point for us. It's a beautiful, beautiful campus. And but for those who are not able to make it, we've got tons of videos and tours, virtual tours of our department. We did, some of during the pandemic, we had did a couple of showcases completely virtually, in which we really went all out and did some drone footage. So it highlights the university. Ooh. And then, it looked like a scene from Fame with our students dancing on top of the garage and down the streets. But anyway, it's making sure that everybody who has an interest in auditioning for us gets to, and then those that we call back, same thing. Airfare should not be the deterrent from having that final callback with us. So, and again, we're figuring it out. I think this year we've got a system down pretty much. But ideally I'd love to have scholarships and funds to bring people to campus who might not be able to have the means to do so. But what ends up happening is that if we've auditioned people virtually who absolutely just weren't able to make it to campus because of all the other audition opportunities they had, once the offer is made, if they do receive an offer from us, that usually does bring them to campus eventually. Yes. And then that does become a deciding factor because, again, gorgeous campus.
Yep.
And great facilities.
Much easier for you to, shell out the money to go to a place where you've been accepted than to go to 15, 20, whatever the number of schools you're doing if you don't even know if they like you yet.
Exactly.
But to be able to go, I can set aside this for the 3 favorites or whatever, when you get to that point.
It's hard. And so we try to structure our that virtual callback day as close as possible to the physical callback day. So it's extra work, but it's worth it. One of the things I've learned a lot about in the past couple of years in terms of creating equity is what can you put aside to make room for something that needs the attention. So I think we're doing pretty well in that. So Great. We'll see. I don't want to go to all virtual all the time, to be honest. I love a physical audition. It's so much fun. The workshops we do together when their students are here are great. I love meeting the parents in person. But I understand that not everybody can do that. So we're making accommodations to help.
All of our coaches talk about that, of like the college process actually gone much more in person than the professional world. I mean, so the number of times that we're like, oh my God, it's my first in-person audition in 2 years. I've been doing all these damn self-tapes or whatever. I mean, it's it's a way in which the college is a little bit more, because nobody wants to be on Zoom. I mean, it's just, at least I certainly feel that way. I'm sick of it. I just want to wrap up with a last question. You mentioned parents, of meeting all the parents. Just speaking to our parent listeners out there, from what you know of the process, and especially your process, is there any advice that you would have for the parents who are going through this process? Maybe whether they're a senior who's deep in it now, or they're a younger student who's just sort of beginning the journey. I'd love to hear what your advice would be for them.
Listen to your kid. See where their passion is. See why. Help weigh out what is important for what they're looking for in a university. What they want out of a program. And then put together a list of pros and cons. Which colleges gave you what you think is what you want for your college career. I think that's the best way to go about it.
I think that's exactly right. A lot of the time, it is the parents' financial responsibility, and that's a lot to consider. So I think that has to be part of, the conversation, is what is feasible. But also, where is your child's passion? Where is that lying? And here's a little thing, just in general, please stay off the chat groups. Please stay off the chat groups. There's not a larger source of misinformation and sometimes disinformation on those chat groups. I think there's a lot of good stuff too, but it really creates, it's just another social media platform, and information just gets thrown about. And I heard. It really does a disservice ultimately to the parent and child in terms of their search. Come to the source. I just did a workshop down in Florida a few weeks ago, and a lot of the parents asked about that. And I just said, just come to the source. Email the heads of the programs, email the teachers. Their email addresses are right there. What do you teach? How do you teach it? How do you form your class? That's for the parent that really wants the information. So please go right to the source.
That's such good advice. Just one or two, I heard this and I heard this, games of telephone, and you'll hear stuff that you go, where did you get that from? That's the opposite of true. That is not correct. Yeah. So true. Well, and they've come to the source right here in this episode, of course, hearing from two of these wonderful sources. If they want to hear more, if they want to read more, where do I find that drone footage? Is it on Instagram? Do I go to the website? What's the best way to keep in contact with Indiana?
You can go to the IUMT page, indianauniversity.edu, iu.edu, I should say. Click on...
We'll put it all in the show notes. They'll be able to click all this in the show notes.
But you can look through the showcase archives, and you should be able to see a lot of it there. We can also send you some Vimeo or YouTube links that might show that as well. But our website has some good videos on it to begin with. So
we love it. So by magic of the future, this will all already be in the show notes of this episode that they can click to view all these things.
And we have a nice presence on social media. We have a presence on Instagram, which is maintained by students as well, which is great. So.
And on YouTube, there's some things on YouTube. There's a virtual tour and a lot of past performances that you can see on YouTube.
Well, thank you both so much for the time today. This was such a pleasure, and I will see you in December. A bing, bang, boom. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Rich and DJ. Always an extra challenge with two people over the internet connections, but they were both so game and warm and really great advocates for their program. And we are really looking forward to having Indiana represented at our upcoming NYC auditions. As far as a takeaway from today, it's going to be a long one. I'm going to give two head nods to like jobs while in school and maybe a further discussion of what to wear. Those are both suggested by our own wonderful Meghan, and both are ones I hope we hit on again. But I have too much to say about Rich's great and very specific advice about chat boards, or maybe he said message boards. I just want to echo the spirit of this advice completely, in that there is so much misinformation and disinformation on the internet that lives in chat rooms, but it also lives in those incredibly deceptive, clickable articles with like top 10 lists, or here's everything you need to know about, etc. Often, it's written by a quote unquote expert. And some of those people, I'm like, are you really an expert in the field? Maybe some of them are, but plenty of them I've seen are by people who are truly, truly not experts. And that same goes for message boards. It used to be the really popular College Confidential. I think that's now a little bit less popular than it used to be, but now it's spread into a lot of different places. And that's it. I think a lot of those places, College Confidential included, are absolutely a source of good information that are intended for good and can be really chock full of a lot of stuff that, like, how would you know this, right? I mean, how else does anyone find anything except to Google it, right? So there's nothing wrong on clicking on what comes up and expecting what you read to be true. The same is true of like a Reddit thread if you do that, or whatever you would look on in the internet. The big advice I would give you with all of it, the same way you would do if you read a Reddit thread or whatever, is that whatever you take, whether it's that chat board or an Instagram post or whatever, take it all with a grain of salt, right? A grain of skepticism. Anytime you see someone write something and state it as fact, just add your own, in my opinion, in big, bold letters on top of it. And that same goes for a so-called expert like me, right? I really try my best to distinguish between when I'm giving you my personal artistic taste, my professional opinion as a coach for 17 years, or something that is truly factual and not subject to subjectivity. But even there, I am completely fallible. And there are plenty of clips from this podcast or quotes from our webinars or things I've written, which, without an in my opinion, could sound dangerously like I'm saying they're fact, when in fact they are my opinion. And just to be clear, something being an opinion doesn't make it a bad thing. If you've listened this far into an episode, you are clearly in search of expertise. And I think you've come to a great place that has a lot of it. But the same is true of a lot of these great message boards, right? We have a great relationship with Marcy and Bunny, these two women who run a Facebook page called the Empty Parent Page. It can be a great source of information. That is partly because I think of the integrity of those two women and the care they take and who they let in and what they let people post and how they moderate it, right? They will actively try to take down misinformation when they can. But that doesn't make this group infallible. And you still want to add, in my opinion, to the end of a lot of posts that you might read, but it can make it a good resource. And I will say, in general, a little shout out to parents. Our previous MTCA parents who've gone through this process have been an enormous and incredible resource to us at MTCA throughout my 2 decades of doing this. The way an actor will often say, I learned the show after I got in front of an audience, or as a playwright will sometimes say, I really get it, or a comedian maybe will go, oh, that's where the laughs are. I got it from the audience. The experience of going through this process with our students, and especially our parents, has honed our knowledge through these years. They are such good BS detectors. Anytime we would say something that wasn't fully thought out, or maybe it wasn't backed up by enough evidence, or maybe it become a little outdated, maybe it was really true 3 years ago, and they go, is that still true today? And they would challenge us, they would question us, and they would keep our ear as fully to the ground as possible. It is, in fact, in listening to them over thousands and thousands of students, we have really intimately learned the landscape of this process more than just coaching our individual students could have possibly taught us. So I just want to be very clear. And by the way, I think this was not at all Rich's intention, that statement, but most parents who go through this process are incredibly thoughtful and incredibly helpful and want to help the next generation succeed. We have our own private MTCA Facebook pages for our MTCA students and family. And the alumni parents, some of them are from 5 to 10 years ago and will still post amazing advice, amazing support. They'll reminisce with the parents. They'll go through it with them. So just a big kudos to parents in general. That said, and to finally get to Rich's point a little bit, I think, anyone who has followed the Twitter fiasco knows the internet is a dark and scary place, and if given full liberty, the worst of humanity will quickly out. Just ask the thousands of people who renamed themselves Elon Musk on Twitter. I do think it will be an incredibly small amount of people who will actively try to sow disinformation, but somehow with that incredibly small number of people, it has a nasty habit of spreading. It only took $8 and a song in their heart for someone to tweet as Lockheed Martin that they were going to halt all Middle East sales for Lockheed Martin to lose billions of dollars in their stock. And yes, sadly, you will see stuff like this in the college process. It's rare, but it does happen. People who maybe are bitter might tweet about a certain school or post about a certain school, about who they're accepting or who they're not accepting. Have things gone out yet, or they haven't gone out yet? What wait lists are not at this point? Or sometimes they'll say that, what was said to them when they didn't get in, as sort of a way of coping. Like they'll say, well, they said they would have accepted me, but they're not accepting any more white girls. Back in my day, it was all on Facebook, and it would just be students claiming to have gotten into schools that maybe either they hadn't released acceptances yet, or they were just lying about results. If you ask them, you see like 80 people who got into Carnegie Mellon, and somehow 60 of them turned it down. All of it can happen. And I do think the more you can block it out or have that healthy grain of skepticism, the better. But this maybe goes even more so than just with the disinformation, which again is rare, but that well-intended misinformation, which I think is all the more common. People will genuinely try to share what their experience was and the conclusions they drew from it, which may or may not be right? It can go either way. Sometimes people correctly surmise what happened in their experience, or sometimes not, right? But the problem is they'll try to make it universal for the process. So they'll take the conclusions that worked or didn't work for them, and then they'll try to put a why in what makes this work for all people. And this is the most natural thing in the world to do. You have to fight against human nature to avoid doing this. We like rules, and we want to make a rule every time something happens. This happened because of this, right? If, I touched the stove, I will burn my hand. If I didn't get this audition and I wore a blue shirt, it's because the auditor hates blue shirts, or blue shirts are bad luck, or whatever conclusion I'm going to draw from it. Which, of course, may be true. Maybe the auditor hates blue shirts, but it's probably unlikely. And even if it is true, is it helpful to you? If you love blue shirts and this is how you think you look the best, heck no. Then obviously this school is not the right school for you. If that's going to be the reason they turn you down, then this is obviously not the right school for you. And again, that's a ridiculous analogy with blue shirts, but I think you can do some of the metaphors yourself. I'll say for me, it was always about, for me, size and roles. That was always really tricky. I would think, I'm too large for this role. I'm 6'4", and so sometimes, especially right out of school, maybe I'd be like, I'm kind of in between ages at the moment. I look old because I'm this size, but I still have a youthful face. And is that going to? How does any of that help me? I mean, I'm not going to suddenly shrink from 6'4" to 6 foot, right? It could help me specifically with roles about deciding what to go in for. But you're not going to decide which college you're going to go into it for because of your size or because of your color or because of your religion or anything like that. So in trying to act on most of this misinformation, most of these rules that you may have read about, you will either cause yourself unnecessary heartache or potentially actively harm your process. If you hear something like school X likes edgy people, and so then you choose to try to dress edgy, you're not following the basic advice, probably the advice you've heard most often on this podcast, which is to present your authentic self to these auditors. I used to get this story a lot from a college faculty member who used to teach masterclasses from us, that their school's reputation from the message boards, and this was sort of out there in general, was that they liked quote unquote edgy students, right? That was the conclusion drawn. That was the rule. And so there was this other coaching organization out there who does talk a little bit more about type, or a lot more about type, and they tell you what to wear. Here's what you're supposed to wear. And they would tell all of their students to throw on a leather jacket when they audition for that school. And so then the faculty member would always be like, I can smell this a mile away. These students are not helping themselves. I know this is a student of this organization, and I know that's not who they are. They're wearing this cute dress and they just throw on a leather jacket. It's just hiding themselves as opposed to sort of showing something. Right? That same advice, that's obviously an obvious example. The same advice goes for this school doesn't like this type of singing, or this school really likes this type of acting, or this school really likes this kind of identity, right? Of course, you want to pay attention to the requirements the school is asking for, but beyond that, you want to present your best self and let them do their job. Somebody else's rule that they've determined is not going to help you. You're going to suddenly sing a style that you're worse at because that's what someone did last year to get in. You're suddenly going to change part of your identity because you think it'll help you. Again, that's the example of me cutting off 6 inches or whatever to be like, they like short people or whatever. That's where so much of this noise becomes really unhelpful. It can help soothe your anxiety in that moment to go, oh, that's why. Okay, well, I couldn't help it. That's why. But it is really not helpful for this process. And I'm going to say further, it is a poor foundation for you as you go through your career and have to deal with rejection, to always focus on that part of the why, right? Apart from your performance and what you can control, focusing on those things that you can control, if anything, it's going to make you bitter. It's going to make you resentful. It's going to put you in a bad place for no reason. Well, one thing you can control, if you want to hear more of this podcast, is hitting that subscribe button. You can also leave us a string of long ratings and reviews to form a sort of chat board in your current podcast application. And follow us on all social media platforms. There's a little rumor going around the message boards that this podcast is getting its own special social media account. Oh my, can you believe it? Stay tuned for more of that information. But until that happens, you can hit us up at Charmer7 and MTCA at Musical Theater College Auditions. Also, if you prefer email, you're welcome to hit us up at mailbag@mappingthecollegeaudition.com or contact MTCA through our main website. The shortcut is mtca.nyc. So many ways to keep in touch. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, wash the beer off your breath and get back into that audition. We'll see you next week.